Let's also tell you that the coronation of the new monarch of England, King Charles III, takes place on May the 6th. Upon succeeding his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, the new king became the head of the Commonwealth of Nations, an intergovernmental organization of 56 independent members states, 52 of which were formerly part of the British Empire, and 21 of which are African countries. Well, citizens of certain African countries mourn the death of the late Queen and the coronation of the new king. There are those who are concerned about what effect this coronation will have on Africa. News Central's Akede tells us more.
After a 70-year reign as the British monarch and at the age of 96, Queen Elizabeth II died on 8 September 2022, passing on the mantle of authority to her son, King Charles III. This new position makes Charles not just the King of England, but also the head of the Commonwealth of Nations, an organization of 52 member states, with 21 being African countries. In recent times, some of these member states, including some of the African members, have questioned and have been rethinking their membership in the Commonwealth. So what should Africans and Africa be expecting following the new coronation?
The mom who passed away was on the throne for 70 years plus. What did Africa get out of it? Now, is he going to depart from what the traditional monarchy attitude has been towards Africa, or is he going to make it different? The divorce with the UK has been long overdue. We should seek relationship that favors Africa.
On the passing of the late Queen, some Africans were very sympathetic and sent condolence messages to the royal family, but there were those who weren't so sympathetic. For them, the death brought back memories of the ills of colonialism and the roles the British monarchy played in it.
I felt so sad when I heard about her passing, but I also celebrate her life as a symbol of leadership, symbol of peace.
We offer our condolences to the Windsor family, but we do not feel compelled to mourn Queen Elizabeth II, considering that she presided over a lot of atrocities in Africa.
One of the sore spots of the West's colonial legacy in Africa is the massive looting of artifacts. Recently, some European countries have returned some artifacts to their original owners in Africa. Some believe this might be an area where the new king can build a legacy.
We still have the heads of our ancestors in the British museums, which we have asked time and again to be repatriated back to Zimbabwe, and that has not been done. And lastly, we have been asking for reparations for everything that was looted from our country. And we are hopeful that the new prince, once he becomes the king, will make sure that we get reparation and that the heads of our ancestors that still lie in British museums will be brought back to Zimbabwe.
But perhaps one of the most significant pieces of jewelry which has been of concern to Africans is the Star of Africa. The 530-carat diamond was found in British-ruled South Africa in 1905. 2 years later, it was presented by the colonial government to King Edward VII for his birthday. This diamond, which is the largest in the world, is set in the royal scepter that King Charles III would hold at his coronation.
If you don't return this, we're not coming. In fact, we're going to consider severing our diplomatic relationship with you. This thing belongs to us. Or if you're going to keep it, let's look at the rental value. Okay, you're going to start paying rent on this item that is not yours.
While it is most unlikely that King Charles III will reign for as long as his predecessor, Queen Elizabeth II, one thing is certain: the expectations of the new king from countries outside of the United Kingdom may just be more than that of his predecessor. Long live the king. Akede, reporting for News Central.
Now joining me live on NC Continental Prime to unpack all of this is Dr. Iwa Salami. She's a reader and associate professor in financial law at the University of East London. Good evening to you, Dr. Salami, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and good evening.
Now, Dr. Salami, the coronation of King Charles III is set at the beam, the search beam of the old world and England. And there's so much excitement around this. But let's try to bring this home. Does this coronation hold any significance for Africa?
Okay, well, I think I heard you correctly. Well, the royal family's relationship with Africa is long, complicated, and of course, as your reporter said earlier, dates back decades. It's obviously intertwined with a history of British colonial rule in several African nations, and one that changed world politics and left behind a legacy, of course, of segregation, economic ruin, and disenfranchised citizens. But since we know that we can't change colonial history or erase that, well, African nations should look at, I'd say, the bigger picture and try to utilize the relationship with the British monarchy to boost things like tourism, for example, which is a big part of their economies. And of course, through this, bring the attention back to the world that Africa is a continent, it's a continent that's so much more than the things we hear in the press, we see on the news, so much more than orphans, disaster, corruption, poverty, famine, and that also that he offers huge opportunities. It has a sizable educated elite. It's got well-trained service industries. It has huge, massive potential for technological advances and innovation, as for example, we're seeing in the area of financial technology, and so much more. So there's a way that we could actually use this relationship to actually benefit the African continent.
Now, Dr. Salami, Queen Elizabeth II, King Charles's late mother, was quite a remarkable monarch. She spent quite some time on the throne, and she's left huge shoes behind for King Charles III to fill. What should we expect from his reign as monarch?
Okay, well, King Charles III, obviously before his accession as king, received numerous awards for various organizations, and for various things around the world, but mostly for his contribution to the environment. So including things like sort of organic farming, gardening, and particularly climate change. So basically, he brings the strength of his office as the King of England to deal with this climate change crisis that the world is currently facing, being himself a huge advocate of the protection of the environment, and particularly at a time where the world is undergoing this huge threat of climate change and needing this, if you like, global rally to actually fight this crisis. I think he brings with him the strength of his office and the leadership that brings, and brings with it the opportunity to actually galvanize this approach to catering and dealing with the climate change crisis, given of course his achievements in the space. So I think there's so much more, there's so much to expect from this king, and so much that he can deliver, particularly to help fight this big issue confronting the world, as particularly one big thing that can be a contribution to the world from his reign as king.
Now, finally, Dr. Salami, a major issue that often comes up whenever the monarchy is mentioned is the crimes of colonialism and its evils and Africa's stolen artifacts. Can those ills ever be atoned for, and is reparations something that can be discussed in the future? Is there room for this, reparations of colonies that were exploited by the British Empire and British colonial rule to compensate Africa?
Yes, so yes, you're quite right in that, and I have to say that in recent years, actually, we've seen some evidence that there's that desire, if you like, to correct things that have been done. So some of the artifacts are being returned. So we saw, for example, in 2021, we saw Jesus College, Cambridge, returned a quite sizable artifact. We saw a French museum returning as well. We saw the Scottish University, and we're beginning to see that conversations are being had with governments and museums. Most certainly, the British Museum having conversations with African governments about the return of certain artifacts. Those conversations are being had, and I think there are huge opportunities for reparations to be done. And we're beginning to see evidence of those conversations being had. A lot more can be done in terms of sort of repatriating artifacts that were stolen. And so the expectations is that more conversations will be had, action will be taken to return those artifacts and to return them to their rightful places. And of course, this is very important, particularly for the current generation we have in African economies, as in the generations of young people. It's so important that these young people on the African continent are aware of what has happened, are aware that they can take possession of what belongs to their countries, particularly as connected to the history of the country, in order to build a better future for themselves. So I think it's so important that we can't just sweep things under the carpet. Important that these conversations are being had and expectations that action will be taken for further repatriation to be done and sent back to where they actually do belong in African countries.
Thank you very much, Dr. Iwa Salami, for joining us on the news. We do appreciate your time and your insights.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.